So John, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everybody, for coming. As Judy said, my name's John. And just to give you a little background about me, I'm a little peculiar. I've started out life in corporate America. My background is actually IT. I am a card-carrying geek. And then I ended up becoming a full-time writer for quite a while. If you're familiar with those friendly yellow and black covered dummies books, DOS for Dummies, Windows for Dummies, books like that, I wrote 25 books in that line. So I've got just under 3 million books in print around the world. I also have a really heady case of imposter syndrome. But I didn't have language for it until actually I started here at Purdue Fort Wayne and started a master's degree in communication. One night, we had kind of an interesting evening. We had this class that was literally called Intro to Being a Comm Master's Student, which was really good for me because my undergrad degree was in business. Business, very black and white, you know, profit, loss. There's none of this in-between stuff. And these College of Liberal Arts discussions we were having were driving me nuts because we'd spend all evening talking about something, and then at the end of it, I'd say, okay, so what was the answer? And the prof would just get this big kind of fun grin and go, well, the discussion was really the answer. There's no right or wrong. It was driving my little business heart nuts. But one night we had this really, really interesting talk. Our prof left, and instead we had 4 upper-level grad students who came in and just sat down with us and said, we want to talk to you about what life is like as a grad student, because you're going to be doing this for the next 2 years or 3 years of your life. And I wasn't sure exactly what to make of that, but you know, I'm game. So they started talking, and then about halfway through, one of these folks looked up and said, I don't know about you all, but every day when I'm sitting here in class, I feel like I'm just waiting for somebody to tell me to get out of class because I don't belong here. Now, you can tell I was a returning student, not exactly a regular student. And I had felt that every single day of going to class. I had felt it when I registered for class. I had felt it when I thought about getting a master's degree. That somebody was going to look up and go, what? He signed up and you let him in? Like, what were you thinking? And when they said that, the room got very quiet. And they talked a little more, and each person we were talking to said the same thing. And then they turned it around and they said, do any of you feel that way? I have never not wanted to answer a question so badly in my entire life. But I screwed up my courage, and I literally closed my eyes because they said, you know, if that's you, raise your hand. Now, there were like 9 of us in the class. And I closed my eyes and I raised my hand because I didn't want anybody else to see, like this is going to solve that problem. And then I opened my eyes and I looked, and all of us were holding our hands up. And I'm looking down the row like, Karen, why do you have your hand up? Rhetoric made sense to you in a way that it will never make sense to me. You know, Ellen, why do you have your hand up? You did an amazing job on that last thing. And they're all looking at me like, John, why do you have your hand up? You've got a great, you know, you can explain things like none of us can. But I never had words for this. I just thought it was something weird about me. And that night I got words for it. I'd never heard the term imposter syndrome before. For me, imposter syndrome is all based around fear. And that's what it's based around for a lot of us. It's a fear of being wrong. It's a fear of being found out. It's a fear of just, sometimes we don't even know what. The good news is everybody's got fear. I mean, this should not be news, okay? We've all got fears of different kinds. That is just, it's part of life. It is a normal thing. How we react to those fears is where things can change. And imposter syndrome, one of the things that it does to keep its control over us is tell us that we should be afraid. Specifically, we should be afraid of talking to anyone about this. It wants to keep us alone. We have fear of looking stupid, right? Well, I don't want to say anything because somebody's going to say, wow, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Or we have a fear of being wrong. I had this idea, but oh, that idea turned out to be bad. Or a thought that others know more than we do about something. So, well, you know, if this had really been an issue, I'm sure someone else would have said it. Interesting story, there was this ship, I don't know if you've heard of it, it didn't make its maiden voyage. There's a really interesting story that came out of a book about leadership and questioning. And I want to share this with you. I had never heard this before. But planners working on the Titanic, they were concerned, but none of them raised concerns. Now, why? They didn't want to look foolish by asking dumb questions. For the want of a question, the Titanic sank. They didn't want to look dumb, but they saw something wrong and they didn't step up. And that's the very heart of imposter syndrome. I see something, but oh, I don't know if I should say anything. That's not my place. There's other people. Maybe they know better. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. And, you know, we know why. Because risk, stepping out into that, stepping out and saying, wait, about that thing, that's scary. Because what if we're wrong? We're going to look stupid. And we don't want to look stupid. And then we stay in our little hole. We're afraid of being alone. I'm an only child, so I grew up playing Monopoly four-handed. It used to really make me mad because the third player would cheat and just drove me nuts. So I kind of got used to being alone, but at the same time I craved being with other people. And I realized as I was growing up, that became so important to me that I would just kind of pull myself back in because I didn't want people to know me. Like, what if they didn't like me? Then I wouldn't have my friends. And geez, I spent all this time trying to make friends. Or if we're in business, that we're not a team player. Because, well, you know, he keeps talking about all this stuff and he keeps going off all these tangents and we're trying to get work done here. Or if you're at home and you don't fit in. Those are the things that imposter syndrome then feeds on and tells us, you know, maybe there's a reason that you haven't said anything all this time. Maybe you shouldn't have said anything because you don't fit and you want to fit. So, what is imposter syndrome? We will go to the official definition here. A pervasive feeling of self-doubt, insecurity, fraudulence, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And that last line is key here. Despite overwhelming evidence, we will downplay it, we will throw it out, we will ignore it, we will just assume that those people who are saying good things about us are lying, or they're doing it just to make us feel good. And we will gleefully throw all that out. This is also a very, in my mind, a very scary side of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome strikes smart, successful individuals who have dealt with especially notable accomplishments, like admission to a university or winning an award. It seems so patently unfair that imposter syndrome should strike somebody who is an achiever. But folks, if you are an achiever, you are probably going to deal with this. I like to think of it as success but. Because really, that's what we hear all the time. You succeeded. You did great. And in our minds, we think, yeah, but. I'm a fake. I'm a fraud. I can't tell anybody that. When I started writing, I went to a big writers' conference out on the West Coast. Now bear in mind, I'd been an IT geek, So I was used to crawling around under desks and checking network wires and explaining to people that no, it wasn't that their printer specifically hated them that it wasn't working. It was in general. Printers hate everyone. That's why they don't work. So that was my background. You know, I was invisible. But then I started writing, and then suddenly my books started doing really well. And I'm at this writers' conference. And I'm kind of walking around because I'm lost. I barely know anybody in the industry. I've met like 9 people, and most of them I met over email. And I run into one person at the event. It's a meal, you know, it's a big plated dinner. I'm alone at this thing. And I run into Andy Rathbone. And Andy wrote Windows for Dummies. Great guy, just really funny, really kind of goofy Californian. Didn't start driving until after he had become a best-selling author, which still just cracks me up to this day. He bought a Porsche, and then he had to get a driver's license so he could drive the Porsche that he bought. But Andy bounded up to me, which Andy's like a good solid head and a half taller than I am. He's like, "John, where are you sitting?" And I'm like, you know, I said something really creative like that. And he said, come on, you got to sit over here with us. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe, you know, it's going to be Andy and Tina, his wife and me. So we walk over and he plunks me down at this table, and it's like, he's like, "Hey guys, this is John. He did," and okay, don't laugh, one of my biggest books was America Online for Dummies. Remember AOL? Back when AOL was a thing? Yeah, I wrote 13 versions of AOL for Dummies. It bought us a house. It was actually kind of cool. But he plops me down here and says, "This is John. He did AOL for Dummies, and he's doing some database dummies books." And these people start going around and introducing themselves to the table. It's like, "Oh, I'm Dan Gookin. Dan created the Dummies line." "Oh, well, I'm Deke McClellan. Deke did Photoshop for Dummies. It's one of the best-selling titles in the line." And we're just going around the table. It's like, holy crap. I'm somebody like the kid at the big kids, at the adult table. And I am lost because, you know, these guys are professionals and I'm a geek. What on earth am I doing at this table? And then later in the conference, I'm sitting next to another guy who happened to be a Fox Pro author, and one of my early database books was Fox Pro for Dummies. And out of the blue, you know, he says, "Dang, I wish I had your sales numbers." And I'm operating from this point where I think I am the average line. Okay, so most everybody's probably above me here, you know, and I probably am the demarcation point for, oh yes, and people we also have to let into the conference. He says, "I really wish I had your sales, man." And I'm like, you don't? You know, what's good for sales here? It's like, well, I'm really happy if I like make back my advance. And without getting into a whole thing about how publishing works, usually an author of a nonfiction book gets an advance. And then as the book sells, you earn back your advance. And if you sell enough books, you get more money, which is a really cool moment. My books had just gone nuts. I had nothing to compare it against. I thought this was the norm, because remember, I'm the average. He's like, "Oh no, man, your books are selling like 10 times what mine are." Really? Awesome. And in my mind, I heard, there must be some mistake, or I must have gotten lucky. I mean, this is textbook. This is stuff that I could not be more of an imposter. And those thoughts stayed with me. People would say, "Well, John, how'd you get started writing books?" It was an accident. And that was literally my opening line. I got started because I hired a temp once when I was a geek. And that temp went on to become an editor at a book company, and she called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, we're doing this new book series. Would you like to be a technical editor? They review the books to make sure they're accurate." Sure, sounds like fun. Luckily, the editor of or the author of the book I was working on was, let's say, topically challenged. It was supposed to be a troubleshooting book, and the author had sold themselves as being a solid troubleshooter. Problem was, the author had only written installation guides, like those guides they pack inside the computer box that says, "Take the green plug and plug it into the green port. Test your computer." So this book was about troubleshooting, and it had things like, if your mouse doesn't work, make sure the cord hasn't been cut off. Like, that's the first thing I always look for, along with like 67 other things that could be wrong. So I ended up doing some writing on that book, and that led to writing on another book, and led to writing on another book. And then they came back and said, hey, we're thinking about doing a database dummies book. Would you like to do a book proposal? Sure, what's a book proposal? And so they told me, and I did it, and they said, congratulations, you got a book. It's like, awesome, I've also got a full-time job and 2 kids under the age of 3. How am I going to make this work? Also, for those of you who are students in the audience and you feel very pressed upon about your writing schedules at classes, Dummies books are 385 pages. My writing schedule, 8 weeks. So I had to turn over 385 pages in 8 weeks, which was always very exciting. My worst one was 385 pages in 4 weeks. That was a bit of a sprint. And then I took like a week and a half off because I just couldn't think about anything. But I always led that story with it was an accident. Not because I could do it, not because I knew anything, not because maybe I was good at it. It was just an accident because I hired somebody and I was in the right place at the right time. That's another perfect imposter syndrome quote. Often you will have success and you will think this will go through your mind. Oh, it was just luck. It's nothing. That's not a big deal. Or one of my personal favorites, oh, everybody knows this stuff. Everybody's got this. I'm not anything special. 3 out of 4 people, according to research, will deal with imposter syndrome. 3 out of 4. It's pervasive. It's literally everywhere. So, what kind of people deal with it? How about Tina Fey? The beauty of imposter syndrome is that you vacillate between egomania and a complete feeling of, I am a fraud, they're on to me, I am a fraud. Okay, so we're talking about Tina Fey, like known comedian, famous human, totally deals with imposter syndrome. You try to ride out the egomania, and when it comes, and then slide through the idea of being a fraud. Maya Angelou, poet. I have written 11 books. Each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're finally going to find out. Michelle Pfeiffer. I didn't have any formal training. I've always had this feeling that one day they're going to find out I am really a fraud and that I don't know what I'm doing. Now, these are, entertainers, but scientists, surely scientists do not have these feelings, right? How about Dr. Margaret Chan, former head of the World Health Organization? There are an awful lot of people out there who think I'm an expert. How do these people believe this about me? I'm so aware of the things I don't know. This, by the way, is a classic gifted quote. Somebody who's in the honors program, somebody who's really high achieving in their area. The more you know about a topic, the broader your understanding is, and the more you realize you don't know. And that starts to affect you. As honors students, oh my gosh, this used to eat people up. One last one, you may have heard of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. Einstein. Let that sink in. People who are operating in very high achieving positions, people who are working outside of a norm. For instance, I'm a first-gen student. Nobody else in my immediate family had gone to college. I didn't know what I was getting into when I came to college. I couldn't understand gen ed classes. No concept. I thought, why am I spending 2 years studying not my major? Because all the time I was growing up, I kept hearing, go to college, get a job, go to college, get a job. I thought, none of this stuff's getting me a job. I didn't know that I didn't know. I didn't know and I didn't understand. Now we've talked about imposter syndrome. and we've looked at slides that were chopped off. But I'm going to ask you to trust me, please, for a minute. I'm going to take you into what I lovingly call a danger zone. This is a verbal cue that I learned a few years ago at a company I was working at. When we're about to have a challenging discussion, it helps if you give a verbal cue to the people around you. Because if you're about to deliver something that may set the room a little on edge, if you do it blindly, everybody's immediately going to kind of step back and go, whoa, where did that come from? But if you can give some kind of a cue, like mine happens to be danger zone, because I like that and it makes me feel like Danger Mouse. So what I want to do is take us into a bit of a danger zone. This is a safe environment. And I'm going to ask you to please step into some trust and see where this takes us. What I would like everybody to do is please, where you're sitting, please close your eyes. And I'm going to read some statements. And I would like you, if you respond to this statement, if this describes you, I would like you to just raise your hand. It doesn't have to be huge and high. You don't have to wave or jump or anything. But I would like you to kind of raise your hand so that we can see. So the first one, it is hard for me to receive compliments or praise. It is hard for me to receive compliments or praise. Okay, you can put your hands down. Sometimes I think my success is just luck, or maybe it's an error. Sometimes I think my success is just luck, or maybe it's an error. Okay? I often think others are smarter, more skilled, or more talented than me. Often think others are more talented, more skilled than me. Okay? I often think I was just in the right place at the right time. Often think I was just in the right place at the right time. I can give the impression that I'm really more competent than I am. I can give the impression that I'm more competent than I am. Okay? Just two more. I'm afraid of others finding out who I really am or what I really know. Okay, and the last one. I fear what others might really think of me. Okay. Now, you can open your eyes now. I know how everybody voted. But I'm going to ask you to step out one more time. If you responded to several of these, what I would like you to do is raise your hand and be able to, and just look around the room. So this is a step of bravery. This is Indiana Jones in the third movie when he's taking the step out onto the bridge that doesn't seem to exist. But please trust me, because there is power in this. If you reacted to these, please raise your hand. And look around the room, folks. Look around. Okay, imposter syndrome loves to tell us we're alone, that it's only us, that we're the only people who feel like this, and that because of that, we can't tell anyone. Because what would they think? What would they say? How would they react to us? That's why this moment is so powerful. Because, folks, you're not alone. Frankly, we're the majority. We're just afraid to say it. So how do you overcome imposter syndrome? What do you do about it? Some tangible things. First, call it out. This one helped me immensely. I actually named my imposter syndrome. My imposter syndrome's name is Mortimer, because I find that name hysterically funny. I've just been going through the Harry Potter movies with my son, I know, belatedly, but it cracked me up because in one of the movies there's a scene where they're teaching the students to face their fears, and they have a spell for that they call ridiculous. If I were naming it, I'd call it something cool like ridiculum, but nobody asked me. But they have this spell, and in practicing it, they have to face this thing that will manifest as their biggest fear. And then they point their wand at it, and they do this spell, ridiculous. and it turns into something stupid and silly that they can laugh at. You know, one was afraid of spiders, and then his version of the spell was that the spider had on roller skates, and so he couldn't stand up, and he's kind of going everywhere. But it helped deal with that fear. So that's why I named my imposter syndrome Mortimer, because when Mortimer comes and tries to talk to me, I can kind of laugh at Mortimer, because really, what do you expect to accomplish if you're named Mortimer in my world? So call it out. When you have those feelings, just stop for a minute and very simply, just say to yourself, that's just imposter syndrome talking. So we're going to have a brief practice moment of this. So you have an imposter syndrome thought popping through your mind. What do? You stop and you say, this is an audience cue. Excellent, excellent. We'll work on more audience cues for next time. So, key thing to remember here is nobody really knows what they're doing sometimes. We're all guessing. That's why I love this, this little picture of the dog. Like, I got no idea. But the dog looks happy while he's doing it. Like, I'm just pressing forward. I hope this doesn't explode. And if it does, I hope it's at least tasty. So remember, nobody really has it all together. And often the folks who look like they have it all together, they're dealing with imposter syndrome just like we are. They're just covering it better. Think best case, not worst case. I am terrible about this. I do a lot of speaking at different events around the country. And when I will send out a notice, hey, see you're doing this event, I think I'd be a good match for it. And then they write me back, I will see that email in my inbox, and I will just kind of sit and stare at it. Like, they're probably going to turn me down. They're probably going to say, like, whatever were you thinking? And I will literally go down that line, and it may take me a little time to open that email, just because I'm just trying to get mentally prepared, because they hate me and they've never met me. And then I open it and like, oh my gosh, we'd love to have you come. But then the other half of imposter syndrome kicks in, and it'll go, well, yeah, they really want to have me, but they're probably just being nice. But I've learned to deal with that. And then I tell Mortimer to go back and sit down in his corner again. Save your compliments. Quite literally, I mean save. If somebody sends you an email and says, man, you did an amazing job. If somebody gives you a ripple here at work, whatever, save that compliment and create a file of them that you can go back to when you're having those days. When you're having that moment like, I don't think I shouldn't have even gotten out of bed this morning. Why'd I even bother? You can go to that file and remember that somebody said, your insights made a huge difference for me. You got the project done when nobody else could. You saved my bacon. Those things matter because when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, we throw them out. We just forget about them because they don't match what our imposter syndrome tells us. Remember that being different is strength. If we were all the same, we wouldn't get anything new done. I think weird, okay? That's why often people hire me, because I'm left field. I was working in a company here in Fort Wayne once, and they literally hired me because we need new ideas, we need new ways of thinking. And so I started tossing out a whole bunch of new ideas, like, hey, we're doing a trade show. My background's trade shows. Here's what I think we could do for the trade show. And the response I got back was, ooh, that's word for word. That's kind of weird. We've never done it that way before. That's okay. Isn't that why you hired me? Well, yes, but we were hoping you'd come up with things that quite weren't that different. Like, okay, so what you're telling me is you want the same, just different. Let me work on that. Difference is strength. It's okay to be different. In fact, it's super awesome to be different. But imposter syndrome is going to chew on you if you're different. Don't compare. We're constantly comparing to other people. Well, this happened to them. They got this. Don't compare. Just do it yourself. Because no matter where you are, no matter how much success you achieve, there will be somebody who is having more success and somebody who's having less success. So just stop comparing. Just be happy with you and see what you can accomplish. Learn to be vulnerable. This is particularly hard when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome says you need to not let people know who you are. You need to keep that wall up. Keep the big happy face on the outside of the wall so nobody can see. But being vulnerable and learning to get to know people and to share with people and to tell people what's really going on in your world, that is one way to get past imposter syndrome, because it's that connection that you make. That's what is going to help you beat this. And finally, connecting with people. You know, the whole being vulnerable, connecting, all of that, it can be challenging. Okay, one of my big hobbies happens to be board games, which in America usually means I'm 8 years old and I'm playing a roll of the dice and move your mice game of Monopoly. And we all know how much fun Monopoly is to play. But you know, I'm into different kinds of board games. I used to own 2 retail stores. I've played tons and tons of games. I write about games for a national magazine. But it's still scary sometimes to tell people that. Oh yeah, I'm really into board games. That's like one of my key hobbies. Because I'm afraid of how that's going to be judged. And it's still a little fearsome even now. It was fearsome 20 years ago when I got started. But that's a big part of me. And so if I'm going to get to know you, I need to share that with you. But I'm going to be interested in you. I want to know what makes you tick. Because if I don't know that, I can't really get to know you. And as long as we stay apart, like our imposter syndrome wants, then we're going to struggle to get past stuff. That leads to this point of self-disclosure. How do you get to know people? Self-disclosure, which is a fancy term for basically saying stuff about you. I'm sharing about me. I'm sharing about who I am and what makes me cool. And self-disclosure can be frightening because, again, it's this stepping out. You know, I'm standing at the edge of the chasm and I'm about to throw myself into, the hands of those who may judge. So I'm, Indiana Jones-wise, I'm about to step out. But you have to, because the option is to just stay in your little wall, you and your buddy imposter syndrome, and y'all are going to have fun together, kind of, except imposter syndrome can't play games. The ability to share is connecting. And without that ability, your imposter syndrome will just keep its claws in you and you won't be able to get past it. Especially in a home environment, especially at the holidays, because you're going to be dealing with family you may not have seen all year. You're going to be maybe dealing with new boyfriends or new girlfriends or new marriage partners or new life partners. You're going to be dealing with a high-stress situation. You're going to be dealing with a time that's very emotional. And all of those things are going to claw their way into you. Imposter syndrome often sees this stuff like firewood in the winter. It's going to be another blazing Christmas. Can't wait to make you neurotic. But don't let it. You don't have to let it. Identifying it, calling it out, taking that risk to step past it, taking a risk to step out and talk about what's going on in your world. Those are ways that you're going to get past this. Over time, yes, it gets easier. Does it ever go away? I personally don't think so. I don't have any data to back that up except what goes on in my own twisted head. But you can manage it, and you can deal with it, and you can get a box that's progressively smaller to keep it in. And you can learn to get past it proactively. So one last thing, and then we'll throw it open for questions and the infamous traveling microphone. So invoking my Steve Jobs here, and one more thing. I would like you to think of one thing that you have avoided doing, or avoided trying, one thing that you have avoided just because you feel like a fraud. Okay, so just get that one thing in mind, and then all at once, I want us all to just say it out loud so that you can get past it. and take action on it. So like mine, I'll just tell you up front, mine is going to be writing my next book. Because it's the irony of I've got all these books out, and yet I never feel like I have something to say in my next book. I go through this. My wife almost would laugh at me because I used to have stress in chapter 4 of a new book because I'd get going and then I'd get about to chapter 4 and I would invariably go to my wife and say, Jenny, why on earth did I even sign this contract? What am I supposed to put in this book? Why did they even tell me I could write this book? And she would say the same thing pretty much every time. Relax. Next one's chapter 5. You'll be okay. All right, hon. And I'd go back and I'd write. And it's like, wow, I made it through chapter 5 too. And then we'd get to chapter 18, and chapter 18 is a whole different kind of problem, but we're not talking about writing today, so you don't have to hear that. No, if you have your thing in your mind, okay, this thing that you have put off, maybe it's asking somebody out, maybe it's applying for a new job, maybe it's launching a new firm, maybe it's just sharing your idea with the world, whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to do a little countdown, and then I just want you to say it out loud. Nobody else is going to be hearing because they're going to be busy talking, right? So here we go. 3, 2, 1, now. Writing my book. Excellent. See, nobody knows what we said. The reason I asked you to do that is because that moment of saying it, that moment of getting it out there, makes it real now. You couldn't hear it, but your imposter syndrome was screaming that whole time. Like, no, I don't want to. Shh, don't listen to the whack-doodle. He's just spouting madness. When you hold back, you rob the world of the magic that you bring to it. And that's why I want to encourage all of you, please do not hold back. The stuff that we're dealing with, we are dealing with. We are all dealing with. It's not you alone anymore. You just met a whole room full of people who are dealing with the exact same thing. So I just want to encourage you there. We can get past this. We absolutely can. Imposter syndrome can be beaten. Hopefully you've learned some tools that you can help, or you can use to help manage that and get past it on your own. So on that happy, upbeat note, let's open it for questions. And Judy has the microphone.
Well, and I'm going to start out. I'm going to ask my
and Judy's going to launch.
What would you say are the causes of imposter syndrome?
That's a really interesting question. The research that I've read, it goes in some different directions for that. The causes that really stuck with me and resonated with me were first in upbringing. For instance, I'm an only child. I was very much the adored child, so I could do no wrong. I used to joke that I could drop an egg on the floor and my mom would find a way to compliment me about how I dropped the egg. And that, I know she meant it in a positive way, but what it really did was set this expectation that no matter what I do, it's probably not good. Because everything got complimented, and I could never tell, like, was that really good? Is somebody else going to really say that was good? I don't even know what's good anymore. So there are things like that. High-functioning folks who are on the gifted and talented scale, every time you go one standard deviation above normal, you get a whole different way of processing information. We have 3 kids, and they're at 3 different levels, and each one of them is totally unique in how they take in and process information. A compliment that I would give to my oldest, that might just run right off his back. If I gave that same compliment to my youngest, he would run with it. If I gave that same compliment to my daughter, she would be on cloud 9. But if I'm trying to correct, a correction that would make my daughter absolutely break and crush her soul, my sons would just, they wouldn't even shrug. You know, to her it would be like a huge mortar blast. To them it would be like a little Nerf dart bouncing off. So I think part of it is also in how we think and how we process information. Part of it does also come from our knowledge, how we have learned things over time and the depth of knowledge. We kind of touched on that earlier, that the more you get into a topic, I found myself sitting, listening to somebody talk, like, oh, I really want to hear them talk about social media, or I really want to hear them talk about writing. And then this person will go through their talk, and at the end of it, I'll think, I knew all of that. That was easy stuff. Why are they up there talking? I was literally looking for something cool out of this. And again, because I saw myself as I'm the mid-mark, then I'd have this moment like, I could have done that talk. But then immediately, Mortimer would show up and he's like, no, you couldn't have. No, because they probably know more stuff that they didn't share today. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, then I couldn't have done that. So where it comes from, I think people are still trying to figure that out. But part of it can be traced to how you grow up. Part of it can be traced to where you are on the gifted spectrum, so to speak. And part of it's going to be based off life experience. Especially like as a first-gen student, I'm stepping into something that nobody else in my family did. So there was, I won't say fear, but there were always times that I felt like my mom and dad could not relate to what I was going through. I used to love programming when I was in college. And one year, a local locksmith hired me to write his inventory system on this brand new computer that he just got. It was so new there was no software for it except a basic interpreter. So I was writing this whole database system. It was so funny because my dad was home during Christmas break. And I'm trying to involve my dad because my dad was a mechanic. He was a damn fine mechanic. But Dad was afraid of computers. And so it was almost like dealing with a chipmunk, like trying to feed a chipmunk and getting it to come to you. Because I'd be sitting here working on the computer, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd kind of see my dad, like coming down the hallway into the living room, just kind of looking, like, what are you doing? And the moment I would turn, it's like, oh, I'm just working through some stuff here. You want to see? Oh, no, I've got stuff to do. And poof, Dad would be gone again. And then about 15 or 20 minutes later, he'd come back. And eventually I learned this sounds so weird, I had to let him get all the way into the room before I could engage him. Otherwise, he'd skitter back down the hallway. And I had to show him paper, not on screen. Like I could say, this is what I'm working on right now. And I could show him the papers that I'd written out, because he could deal with that. But then once I got him there, he'd kind of look at the code. But I think in his heart, he was afraid that he would look foolish because he wouldn't be able to figure out what I was doing on screen, because I was the smart college guy. Other questions before I subject you to any more stories? Nobody? Anybody? We got a question.
It might be a strange one. I don't know if we can answer it or not, but
go for it.
What are your views on institutionalized discrimination as a cause of imposter syndrome?
I certainly think that would fit. I absolutely do. Because if you're told the same thing over and over and over, and you're treated that way, then you're going to internalize that. And after a while, you're just going to automatically think, yeah, I must be stupid. Or, no, I probably can't do that. There's a really, really interesting video that when I do presentations like this for larger format college audiences, there's an imposter syndrome video that was made by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that is specifically about women in engineering. And it's interviews with a whole bunch of female software designers, engineers, et cetera. And that is part of what comes out in this video over and over and over. I was the only female in my class. I was the only female in the department. I was the only person in high school who was interested in this. And I was entirely around these others. And the challenge of that and the feedback of constantly like, why are you here? Why are you even part of this? What do you think you're going to accomplish? Some of the material that I have read suggests that women deal with imposter syndrome more than guys. possibly because at some level we have this just stupid level of of course I can do that. It's a rock. I'm certain I can move it with my car. We just have this stupid level of confidence in ourselves. And after 30-some years of marriage, I see sometimes in my wife, I see that play out. Because Jen is one of the most amazing people in my world. I got to know Jen in college. And she was on a full-ride academic scholarship to Ball State. It wasn't until many years later, years into our marriage, we were going through stuff. And she opened up this folder of stuff I had left over from college. And it had a letter in it that was an invitation to apply for this scholarship that she had gotten. And she's looking, and she's like, "You got a Whitinger invitation." I looked at her and I said, "Oh, that's not an invitation. That was just a mass mailing they sent out to everybody." It's like, "No, they only sent that if you were qualified for the scholarship." No, that went to everybody. There's no way I'd qualify for that scholarship. You guys were smart. It's like, no. And then we did this thing that married college couples do. I'm not sure if anybody else does, but then we compared our SAT scores. And I was absolutely stunned to find out that I was actually 60 points higher on the SAT than my brilliant wife was. And I say that in total humility, like I was shocked and stunned. Because I figured that Jen had like a 1600. I figured she aced the thing because she was brilliant. She was very academically smart. She got college. She was a perfect match for it. I was walking, talking B's and C's get degrees. But in that moment, there was that epiphany for me like, oh my gosh, maybe I was smart. It lasted for a few seconds and I got rid of it. But there was that moment and that understanding that, wow, even though Jen I saw her as being brilliant and floating through all of this. Then later in life, as we were married and we're dealing with life, there were times I would see her back down from something. And I'd think, "Honey, why are you doing that? You're smart. We just had this discussion like 4 weeks ago because she's got this new book she wants to write." And she was genuinely afraid. This woman's already written 10 books, says the guy who's written 35 and is still doubtful. But I said, "Honey, of course you can write this." "Well, I don't know. It's different." "Honey, it's going to be brilliant. I don't know if anybody'd want to read it." "Well, we won't know until it's written, will we?" Sometimes I feel like I should be my own coach. Like I should just stand and look in a mirror and go, "I don't know if I can write that book." "Dude, you can totally write that book." And because, it's that moment. But my experience, I sometimes wonder if what I've read that it affects women more than men, I wonder if that's not true. Because I see it play out. And personally, I think it's because of sensitivity and sensibility that women are more attuned. And I think it's easier for them to then downplay things. Especially what you were just talking about with our institutions seem very male-dominated. So, sorry, I really wandered on that one.
John, I've got
Anybody
another
else?
question.
Sure, go.
How about imposter syndrome versus health? Is there information related to imposter syndrome and mental health, imposter syndrome and physical health? Does it make you at risk of having health problems?
I'm speaking out of my own experience. I would say it is definitely, it would make sense. As you can tell, I am extremely svelte. This is like after 50 pounds of loss, so I'm very excited about that. But going to your point, Judy, I used to want to work out, and I was deathly afraid of working out, not because I was afraid of the physical exertion, but because I was afraid of walking in and being around all of these fit people who knew what they were doing. So I'm having my own moment of, I don't know how the machines work. I don't know how the weights work. I don't know what to do as an exercise. I'm going to be around people who are all fit and don't look like me, and they're all going to be looking at me, and they're all going to be going, "Whoa, what's that dude doing here? We'd better call the EMTs because there's a heart attack over there on the treadmill." And for me, what got me past that and got me to start working out, to get over that, was Okay, I went to the health center and I looked at what kind of treadmills and exercise machines we had, and then I looked up their manuals online so that I'd just be able to walk in and like, yeah, know how to do this, hit that, hit that, hit that, start working. Oh yeah. I'm cool. See, nobody's looking. Okay, good. So I think, yes, it can get in the way of that because often imposter syndrome comes connected to that fear of doing something wrong. So if I can't do it right the first time, I don't want to do it at all. It comes connected to that fear of what will other people think. If they see me in here, if they see me doing this, then they will think that they will think la da 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 da. And that's kind of the third thing that goes with that. Even as I've been describing this, the whole thing about assuming the worst instead of the best, I automatically assume that if I go to work out, I'm going to run into Judy because she's in charge of health, and Judy's probably going to be standing there thinking, damn time you got in here. And now I'm going to be judged, and I don't want to be judged. Maybe it's just easier to stay home today. I could use my Fitbit. I could walk around the house. Oh, there's a lot of junk on the floor of the house. Maybe I better not do that. I could use my Wii Fit. Oh, don't have batteries for it. Maybe I should just stay here in bed. So yes, I do think imposter syndrome can relate to that. Anybody else want to be brave and ask a question? Over here in the corner, Judy.
Hey. Do you think that imposter syndrome varies across culture and like what people doubt?
Wow, that's an intriguing question. I think that it's a human condition, so I think it does vary across culture. That's interesting. Nobody's ever asked me that. I could see, I'm trying to think about some stuff that I was hearing about leadership in France versus leadership in America. The example was given of a person who was French coming to the US to work, and how a friend of theirs, they had kind of a mutual friend who's their boss, and the boss is giving the friend feedback like, I know you told me that she knows what she's doing, but oh, good Lord, I can't get her to do X. And the boss was feeling very, very frustrated. And the person working, talking to their friend, because the friend's then checking in with the worker, like, how's everything going at work? Is everything okay? And the person was like, oh yeah, it's great. I talk to my boss a lot, and he gives me a lot of compliments, and it's just wonderful. And it came down to how this person from France heard the feedback from the boss. Because in the United States, we tend to throw out something good, and then it's a sandwich. We'll throw out something good, and then we'll whack you with a ball bat in the middle, and then we'll throw out something something simple. I heard the great example of somebody saying, "Oh, you're dressed very nicely today. I hate you, and I hope I never meet you again. But I like your shoes." So it's just this sandwich of stuff. And culturally, because of how the French culture worked, they would lead off with negative, 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 and then like throw in a positive at the end just because they were more direct. And the person was reading this from the American as being, oh, he led with a compliment, all's good. I can totally see how that would feed back into how imposter syndrome would work there. But I imagine that, and this is opinion, this is not based in research, I imagine that it goes to the heart of the same issues. That there's always that issue of, do I fit in? Do I belong? Will I have friends? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel confident? Do other people know more than me? Are they looking at me weird? Thank you. Yes. Now we're on a roll.
As a follow-on to that, how do you think imposter syndrome differs from sort of that run-of-the-mill, what you're talking about at the end there? Everyone has self-doubt, no one can do everything. And then how do you think that links into, you mentioned being in graduate school when you sort of became aware of the term. How do you think for young people you know, we could, you know, I liked your list of we can do these things, but even just introducing this topic in, you know, younger ages, and how do you think, you know, that we could kind of differentiate between, you know, we all have fears and self-doubts versus sort of what is imposter syndrome, and I'd be interested just in your thoughts on that generally.
That's an intriguing pair of questions. I guess I'll take the last one first because it's freshest in my mind. I think, and this is based off, we have homeschooled 2 kids and my wife's got a degree in education. So I've been an observer of education in our little home. Based on how our kids went through everything and the issues they dealt with, I think introducing things like this in the high school level and then as in the freshman college level would be a great time. I'm not sure if somebody would have told me about this in high school, if I would have really processed it, or I would have just thrown it out. It's like, oh yeah, that's nice. That's for people who are probably smarter than me, who are, you know, I would have started going through my little list and you know, would have exempted myself from imposter syndrome. As a grad student, I was so thankful that we went through this when I was a brand new grad student, because I hadn't even made it through 4 weeks of class and I was solidly feeling this. I felt it from the moment I sat down with the first prof to talk about my master's program. First question that he asked was, so what do you want to research? And the very first thought in my mind was, well, today I'm trying to research a master's degree. I didn't know that he was asking me what I wanted to do my master's degree about, but I kind of figured that out from the look on his face when I waited. And so I just threw out the first thing that was in my mind, like, I hope this isn't stupid. I hope he's not going to laugh at me. Said, well, I wanted to look at family communication and how board games can affect that. 2-beat pause. That sounds amazing. Like Matrix. You know, just dodged the bullet on that one. So I think introducing it would be a tremendously helpful thing. How does it differ from just run-of-the-mill, I'm not sure about myself? I think they're connected. But I think at some level, I can help somebody, I can boost somebody's confidence if they're just having that moment, like, I'm not sure I can do this. You know, we've all been in group projects sometimes where you had some people in the group who are like, I don't know if I can handle this part of the project. And so you kind of rally around them and you help them, you boost them through, and they're going to get there. I think somebody who's dealing with doubts, they'll take that boost and then they'll run with it. Somebody who's really dealing with imposter syndrome will take the boost, but it'll look more like I made it up there, and now I'm right back down where I was. Well, I made it over that one, but I can't make it over the next one. And probably that repetition is what I would say defines the difference between the two. Because if it's just a doubt and I can get past that and I run, then yeah, it was just a doubt. But I think imposter syndrome is going to make me replay that same problem over and over and over again. So with that, I will close. I will hang out if anybody wants to chat briefly after this. So Judy, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I really appreciate you being here today. And John, thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you all for coming.